There we go. How you doing? Okay, I guess I'm. It's I got the 2 minutes. I guess I got this the intro or whatever. Um, so I guess the topic is religious institutions should be taxed. I'm pro. Ben here is he disagrees with that. I'm really only arguing in favor of taxing, I guess, religious congregations, which I would which I'm just including, I guess, synagogues, mosques, churches, things like that. I guess I wouldn't tax other ones that are actually acting as a nonprofit and is actually doing good for the public. If they're actually doing that favor, then they should, of course, receive tax exemption. But if they are, of course, not following the same tax code that they are filing for, then they should obviously lose that tax exemption, because tax exemption is also a privilege, because they receive about, well, on average, if you were to tax all religious congregations in the United States, at least, which there are 300,000, if you were to do that, you would, sorry, trying to come up with the number. You would, I believe, come up to, if you charge them as I know if it's not for profit, 71 billion. And if it's just for, if they're following the same code as every other nonprofit, whether it's secular or religious, they would receive 16.5 billion. And that was a study conducted by, I believe, the Secular and Humanist report or whatever. It's a sociologist who conducted it with a couple students. You can look it up.
Alrighty, just give us a thumbs up if you can hear me. Yeah, excellent, sweet. So just fair warning, because this is on my phone, because my laptop shit itself, there's a non-zero chance that I get a call, but I'll come back to it as soon as I can. Okay, first thing, I gotta say, I think the way you've set this debate up is a little bit confusing. I don't think in the topic that religious institutions should be taxed, you get to just ignore some religious institutions. So, for example, the way you described it, it says, if they're genuinely non-profit, then they shouldn't be taxed. Well, I would just put to you that most, like that's not, that debate is, should profit things be taxed, not should religious institutions be taxed. Most religious institutions are non-profit. And they're non-profit in the sense that they're not like selling things to hand over to shareholders. They're selling things to put back only into, like, you know, the congregation, and to reinvest into like the church and its, you know, facilities and stuff like that. And I get that that line can appear blurry, but I'm just going to take the hard line. Don't tax religious institutions. Furthermore, you have the idea that, look, if they're not following the code, if they're not following the law, well, like, clearly if they're breaking the tax law, then they should be taxed, right? Like as in if they call themselves a religious institution, but they're not actually one. But really, that's not what this debate about. This is just, in principle, should you tax them? The first thing you said was that it's a lot of money, which I don't think is a good enough reason to tax something. If you tax, for example, all of the richest people by like an additional 50%, you'd also come up with a huge sum of money, but that isn't justification in and of itself to tax something. You have to show that the tax is just. I've got 20 seconds. So the first reason I'll suggest it's not just is that religious institutions, their income comes mostly from donations or money made off those donations from their parishioners. And those people have already paid income tax on those donations. So it would be like double taxation, which I'm not sure if you're okay with, but I'll hand the mic back to you. Yep. Oh, until I pass the mic. Shit. Sorry. Pass the mic. Oh, no, it's overlapped with the bloody texting. Pass the mic. Right.
Sorry about that. That was my fault. I think the way that I set up the argument is actually perfectly fine, just because the taxation is not being set like because you are a church or a religion. Of course, it's because you're a nonprofit. And if you are a church that is filing to be a nonprofit through the tax code, and again, what I'm saying is, I guess what I'm saying is, really, you shouldn't be tax exempted, because you're still taking property that could otherwise be charity, which kind of destroys the whole purpose of how, you know, they're charitable and they do a lot of good around the world, and a lot of that money comes back to them. That's not always true in every case, because there is this thing called a parsonage exemption, and that's where the minister themselves can decide their own allowance through many ways. Actually, if you look up David E. Taylor, he's been able to buy you look up David E. Taylor and Joel Osteen and all of them, you'll see the fucked up part of that. But those certain people are benefiting off of property that could have otherwise, like I said, been a charity or even another corporation that could have also donated the same cause. I mean, like I just don't understand why granting them tax exemption just for merely being a religious organization should really I guess be plausible as well. So I guess here you go.
Yeah. Okay. So the first reason it might be just because they're religious is the reason which I brought up, which you didn't respond to, which is that people who don't, the money they're getting comes from donors. So these are people who are religious individuals, and they feel like a correct expression of their faith, and I'm not one to knock, is that they donate to their church to support the church. Now, those individuals have earned that money, they've paid tax on it already, and they want to spend it on something. Now, what I'm suggesting is that I'm not a fan of consumption taxes in general, but I think especially for religion, them choosing to spend that money on their religious expression seems like something the government doesn't deserve any part of. And one of the big reasons for that, which might make it different from, say, like the consumption tax, like the VAT if you're in the UK or the GST if you're in Australia, is that the government really doesn't have any part in providing the religious service, which means to say that when you go to the shops and you buy like food, right? The government has intervened in many steps in the way to make sure that the food gets to you. But for the church, you're paying for like a religious experience, which the government cannot provide and is incapable of providing, which is to say that the government doesn't deserve any of your payment for that religious service, because it is not providing any of the good for you. Just to quickly address a few of the points you brought up. You said that the money could otherwise be charity, but I actually don't think that's true, because that relies on you thinking once you put the tax on the church that people will stop spending their money there and start spending on a charity. I don't think that's true at all. I would speculate, and I think most people would agree, that people who donate to churches donate for specific religious regions which are above and beyond charity, which is why, for example, they don't donate to like all different churches randomly. They donate to the same one of the same faith because it's their faith. You also said that there are certain rich parishioners. I just think that the people donating to them should hold them to account and not spend that. Pass the mic.
Can you hear me? All right. That was a lot to process, I guess. The point that I think you said I was missing or whatever that I wasn't addressing, I think you said. Actually, can you please say that one more time?
Yeah. Okay. So can you hear me? Can you give me a thumbs up? Yep. Okay. Right. So it's that when, for example, you pay tax on goods you consume, the government is playing a part in you consuming those goods. When you pay money for religion, right, for a religious service, the government isn't giving you any of that religious experience, because the government is a-religious. So the government doesn't deserve any of the money you donated, particularly because you've already paid tax on it.
Things called subsidies, where you do get a tax write-off, and I did bring up a parsonage exemption. So if you are, I don't know what you said against that, but I mean, there's really no other way to really know what the pastor can do with that money if they're not filing under a section 1.3. My bad. Yeah, section 1. It's a code in the tax 990 where you can pretty much be exempt from taxes for being a nonprofit, because you're doing the public good for that what the government wouldn't have done, or you're just really relieving the government of their deeds of doing the public good, which I don't agree with, that they do that all the time, but that is the concept and the purpose of it. Hold on here. I guess my argument too is also it does allow for fake churches and fake religions to also be granted tax exemption. And tax exemption doesn't mean like you're just not getting money, or I guess you're just not paying money to the government. You're also receiving money from the government. Or at least that property could have otherwise been a corporation, just like Walmart. Which, let me just put this over here, because let me just say this. I mean, sorry, pulling up a lot of dumbass. All right, for Walmart. No wasting time. Blah, 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 blah. It's all the way in the end. I got 7 seconds. Damn it. I'll just make that point later, I guess.
Okay, look, I'll address those points you did brought up. So the first thing you said is that what about the rich pastors, the people who in your gut you feel are like, misspending the money? I think it would be a mistake to think that the people who donate money, and I get what you're talking about, like the prosperity gospel people and that. I get that to a secular person. It looks like they're being scammed, and there's a fair chance that some of them might be. But the real thing here is that it's the experience of donating to the church which gives you the idea that you have done your bit. Which is why, for example, like when I was a kid, and going to church as like a 12-year-old who didn't know what was going on, like putting the gold coin in the baskets that went around. It's not like I was overly cerebrally concerned with where that money was going and is the church spending it correctly, or is the priest getting a too fine a trim on his garments. It was just the idea that you were doing what you could to something higher. And what I'm suggesting is that the government doesn't deserve 30% of that experience, right? Because it hasn't contributed to it. The next thing, and if there are rich parishioners who are genuinely spending the money wrongly, then I think the people who are going just shouldn't donate anymore. If they're that uncomfortable with the way the church is spending the money, then they don't have to donate. It's voluntary. But the fact that they keep on donating shows that at least they feel like they're getting something out of it, and who are we to judge? You said things about fake churches and fake religions. Look, I just reckon, again, the money is being given consensually, which means that to that person, that religion is real. And I think it would be weird for the government to start deciding what is a real religion and what is not a real religion. Obviously, it can enforce things about not for profit, but that's not a religious distinction. And the last thing you talked about is that they're receiving money. They're not just getting a tax exemption. No, that's a subsidy. I'm not in favor of subsidizing religious institutions. That's not the debate. It's just tax exemption. So I'm not in favor of them receiving money.
A lot of churches do act like a business when the minister is making, when you have, like I said, Joel Osteen making $40 million. $40 million. So using the church to sell this book, which I don't believe that book also gets a sales tax. That's not something that I want to acquire. But when I'm saying property, you're using the property that could otherwise be something else. There are 300,000 churches in the United States. That's about 6,000 in each state. That's taking up a lot of space. That's about I'm sorry, this is a study, and anybody could look this up. This is all information that I know I can't cite it exactly, but
Okay, so I actually missed a lot of what you said because my mic dropped out, but I'm going to respond to what I heard. So I apologize if I missed anything. It seems to me that the two things you're primarily concerned with is, one, that the people who are benefiting from this tax subsidy are not behaving like a religion, they're behaving like a business in terms of selling books, and two, that you could get a lot of money off them if you tax them. I'm going to address them one by one. The first one, if they're selling books, I don't think that should count, if you know what I mean. Like, what I'm talking about is that religious institutions, when they receive money from donations, when most people receive money, that counts as income and is subject to income tax. I'm suggesting that the money donated to religious institutions should be exempt because it has been donated to people who have already had that money taxed off them and have donated something which the government cannot provide. If the church uses that money to sell things and act like a corporation, then I think, and the profits are going to a person, not the church, then that shouldn't be tax exempt. I can see, for example, if, the church sells some Bibles or whatever, and then spends the money back into the church to, improve the infrastructure for the people who donated, that seems like that should be tax exempt. The next thing you said largely is that there's a lot of money we could be getting here. So, I'll believe you on the studies, by the way, that there is a lot of money which could be gotten. The thing is, just because you can get a lot of money out of tax doesn't mean you should get a lot of money out of tax. You could get a lot of money out of tax if you tax the richest people all 100%. You need to come up with a just reason as to why the government deserves that money. And what I'm suggesting is that this money has come from people who have already paid tax on it, who are donating for it for religion, which the government cannot provide, and that money has been reinvested in their religious experience. And if the people are unhappy with the way the pastor is spending the money, then they don't have to donate. They can stop. But if they've continued to donate, they clearly are satisfied.
Oh, it's my turn. Damn, I like you, Ben. I like you, man. You are doing a really good job. But you're also not addressing the fact that I'm not saying that they should have been taxed the full amount. Again, everybody look at the study. They weren't taxed. This study was if they just paid things like federal, state, and faith-based initiatives, because as a secular person, I shouldn't really be subsidizing that. But I really have a problem because I don't want to create direct tax for religious reasons. I just want to create direct tax for property because I get property tax for having my home. A hospital actually gets a form of tax. I believe it's a property tax in other forms, and to obviously pay the doctors there for good reasons, of course. But I'm just saying, $71 billion per year off of subsidies. And again, I get it. The church, that's also donations as well, but that's also off of subsidies, property sales, everything, and it could be billions of more. I'm not saying to use all of that, but I mean, don't give it strictly just to the church, or at least to the minister. It has to somewhere. There has to be a line somewhere. But I'm gonna give you some time because I want to have a close.
Alrighty. Yeah, this might be the last for me. So look, when you were talking about your home and property, why is it different? The difference is that when you buy a home, the contract which says that that home is yours is enforced and recognized by the government. Without the government, that contract means nothing because no one would recognize it. The difference is, and also obviously the government facilitates the transactional things between you and your home, which is why, for example, you might pay a premium to your real estate agent, right? The real estate agent gets some of the money from the home sale, even though they don't own in the home, because they assisted you in the getting of that home. When it comes to religious institutions, the government is not assisting people putting money in the basket, right? The government has assisted the people getting that income and that facilitated their employment, which is why the people who are donating have paid tax already for that government assistance. The government didn't assist them to go to church, it didn't assist them to donate, and it didn't assist the church in the way it used those donations, so it doesn't deserve any of the money, which is why it shouldn't be taxed.
I love you, Ben. That was awesome. Good point. But I don't think that. Damn, it's not really much to say about that because there's a lot to say about it in such a little amount of time. But what I would say is just hold them to the same standards as non-secular nonprofits. They want to follow as nonprofit, they should follow the same rules. It's not going to